Well, good day, everybody. This is Gregory Mascaro. This is on my political talk. Just a few ideas. Remember, it's called Ramblings of a Confused Mind. Today is Monday, August 14th, 2017. It's about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. A lot's been happening, a lot going on again. You see them arguing and saying, oh, the Trump administration, this guy, that guy. Here's something everybody should be getting their head around and being happy with. For the last 30 to 50 years or so, up until President Reagan, I'd say, we've had the Congress and the presidents and the political powers that be selling out the American citizen and the United States Constitution. We now finally have, let me include in there corporate America. We now finally have an outsider. We should be jumping up and down and rejoicing in the streets that we have a non-political person in there to clean house. Let's hope that he stays an honest, righteous, integrity-guided individual following the Constitution and the laws and rules that benefit the United States and the citizens. We don't need to be involved with the UN, having UN gaining authority over us. That's a treasonous act by the constitutional laws. We could participate with the UN and say to our allies, when someone is not behaving rightly, this is what we're going to do together. But that does not give the UN sovereign authority over us. The last 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even longer, because you had Ted Kennedy agree to stuff with the UN, that we have our politicians agreeing to protocols and treaties with the UN, giving the UN authority on our property. That's a violation of the Constitution. Spelled out in the Constitution, whoever agreed to that is a traitor. That's treasonous. This Nancy Pelosi dingbat, who would ever enter any contract and sign their name to it saying you must pass this 1,800 plus page bill to find out what's in it? That's another moron. Another criminal treasonous act. Oh, James Madison, quoted as saying, "It will be of little avail to the people if the laws are so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood." That's what Obamacare was. When President Teddy Roosevelt was president, Congress wanted a bill on his desk. He mandated 1 page. It has to be 1 page to get on his desk before he'll even consider it. This is the type of thinking we as the citizens have the right to dictate to Congress. This is what you're going to do. We have the right to tell Congress, you do not get a full pension for 1 term. You'll get a fractional pension. With regards to pensions, pension designed for public employees should not be a defined benefit program. Pension designed for public employees, whether at the state level, municipal level, city level, government level, federal level, should be 401k. And those politicians should have to participate. And the government does not have to contribute anything on their behalf. The defined benefit it should be what you and I use on our own level. That's more beneficial to us. That's more beneficial to companies. It's ass backwards, but it is what we have. You personally can change your own. Trying to change it what's on Congress and on a government level, on a city levels, that's something that you're going to have to vote for. That's something you're going to have to educate yourself on. We now have crisis going on with North Korea a second time. And trust me when I tell you this, there's no crisis with North Korea. China can't stand by and let them do anything stupid. China has over 1.6 trillion reasons to not let North Korea do anything stupid. So here it is, another smoke and mirror distraction that's going to take away from your liberty. They're going to use this to diminish your liberties. They're going to use this to diminish your wealth. When they discuss Russia and collusion and voter fraud, know this. Every country, since the beginning of time, has been colluding and interfering with each other's politics That's why we have boots on the ground. That's why we go to war. We want to change the political landscape on that other side. We should be exporting our Constitution. We should be exporting free enterprise. The issue with the United Nations becoming the authoritative power, governmental body, and that's the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, the International Trade and Settlements, the Center for Foreign Relations, all of those government authorities are trying to be the government authority over all countries and having all countries become sub-governments to that. That goes against our Constitution. And in an ideal world, it's a beautiful thing to say a world without borders. But a world without borders with people embracing the same fundamental ideology. Right now, we don't have that. We have a world that they're trying to force migration. And in that forced migration, they are bringing violence to your neighborhood. The terrorist extremist on that Muslim Islamic faith is 10% of that population extremist. That's 140 million people that could be extremists. That's 140 million people that could be populated around the world that are willing to blow themselves up or put an improvised explosive device in a backpack and leave it at a parade or a center of a concert like they've done. This is what they invited into your territory. This is what they invited into your neighborhood. This is what's been invited into our country. All of these people defending this are morons. They don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand the threat. All right, this threat is real. And part of why they want to take away your Second Amendment rights is because you would be allowed to defend yourself. And in this beautiful utopia world with the UN at the head and every other government answering to the UN, our Constitution doesn't fit. That's why they want to take away your constitutional rights for wealth and wealth creation and your constitutional rights for being able to bear and defend yourself with your own arms. With the voter fraud and the collusion, we've been colluding with countries all along. The difference is when two countries talk behind closed doors, are those two heads of states making plans that benefit the nation and the world, which is perfectly all right, or benefit themselves, which is perfectly illegal. That did not take place with this president in Russia. And Russia did not really do anything to our voter score. What you had to be concerned with the voter ideal situation for the voter was there was videos where people were able to tamper with the electronic machines and change one vote to the other vote. That's what they should be looking for. That's the threat. That's the voter fraud. Not the fact that Russia is saying, hey, there's this, there's that in their public news. They could say whatever they want. They're allowed. It's their country. Russia did not come over here and fund people to promote news or billboards or marketing against the others other than Trump. They did not fund people supporting Trump. Russia did none of that. Whereas the traitor of the last administration, he did. He took our public funds and funded political advocacy in Israel and put up billboards and news releases and pamphlets and marketing to actively try to subvert the vote away from Netanyahu. And let me tell you this, the day that we turn our backs on Israel, this country is in a very, very bad way. So those are issues on that. The issues with Virginia, I don't support anybody doing violence for any reason. It's the Constitution. Stand up to the Constitution. There's a lot more that happened down there than what's being told. Doesn't justify any of the action on anyone's side. But this is what we're up against. And we have to learn how to be one voice. And that one voice has to be a rallying cry for our Constitution. The way the government's supposed to work, if there's a good idea with the people and they want to make it heard, it goes to their local congressman and their local senate, and then it gets to the floor of Congress, and then it gets voted on. What you're seeing really happening right now is states are coming up with these really bad ideas where they can't afford these lovely utopian kind of programs. Let's pay for this, let's have free this, let's have free that, let's have that. Well, their state tax roll don't afford it. So what do? Let's put it to the federal level. Let's make it a federal law and have the federal government implement this law for our benefit. So now our state that's doing a criminal, illegal, unconstitutional idea is having the other states help pay for it. No, it don't work that way. Federal government is supposed to be there for our military, our borders, our Constitution, our freedom of speech, our EPA, our food, and our water. Anyone on the state level can do whatever they want. That's their business. If they can afford to do these liberal ideas and these public service program ideas, and they can do it with their taxes, and the people are willing to be taxed to death, that's the state business. Same thing with the health insurance. Health insurance had no issues, and there wasn't anyone not covered in America who didn't have insurance, because in America we have Medicare, we have Medicaid, we have Social Security services, but aside from all of those, we also had no one can turn you away from medical care for your inability to pay. Would you wind up with a bill on your own neck? Yes, you would. And they would have to accept $5 or $10 a month. Anybody should be able to afford, depending on how dire their income situation is, $5 or $10 or $2 a month that they send to that bill. There was never an issue of people not having coverage. What this design did, and this is why it's not getting resolved on the federal level with trying to repeal and replace. In that 1,800-something page law, that wasn't a law. We didn't get our voice heard on it. It went through reconciliation, which eliminated having the 62 vote and went down to a majority vote above 50 or 51. Reconciliation was never intended for something so vast, large, and broad in scope, and so heavily impacting our nation's GDP. Healthcare is 1/6 of our nation's GDP. It was never intended for that. So when this previous corrupt administration, this traitorous, villainous administration, who said they're going to be transparent, did this in the late of night while Congress was on vacation, without all the other voices of all the representation to vote against it, passed this as a law. Right? Then it went to the Supreme Court to be said, can it be a law or a mandate? Well, they tried it as a mandate. They tried it as law. It got approved as law. It got challenged in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said it can't be a law. It's allowed to be a mandate, and they addressed it to say it's a mandate for taxation. And then it came out of the Supreme Court saying it's allowed to be a taxation, that the federal government can tax you and I as an individual for our health insurance and bring this down as a mandate. Okay, so now it's a taxable taxation. Again, our voice was not heard on a tax. We did not go through the proper process of approving a tax. It went straight from the Supreme Court from being a mandate to being approved as a tax. We never got to vote on that. So all of this is criminal activities on both sides of the aisle getting this in front of our face. With that being said, it's not easy to repeal and replace, even though I'm totally dissatisfied that they had over 7 years to be ready for this. Because unwinding it, it's like trying to cut the right wire on a massive improvised explosive device that has thousands of entanglements and wires on there. And if you cut the blue wire instead of the green wire and not the correct wire, the economy goes boom. The way they wrote that law, it's entangled in the property of your house. It's entangled with your employer. It's entangled with your personal life on your personal business. It's entangled with Medicare and Medicaid. It's entangled with the poverty level. It's entangled with penalties if you don't have it. So if they repeal and replace it, they would have to try to go back and address all of those concerns. How do I address all those people for the last number of years that paid penalties? How do I address all those people that sold property that paid that 3% tax on the sale of their property? All of these entanglements create the hard repeal and replace of this insurance law. Now, there's things the federal government could have done. It's the same thing they did back when we first started with railroads. We had lots of different independent railroads, whole lot of different size, width of tracks and wheelbase. And finally, the federal government said, no, you're going to unify. We're all going to be the same standard track width, arc of the turn, and everything. That way we could make the country smaller. We could get around. And that's when they created the intercoastal railroad. So the federal government could do the same thing with health insurance. They can mandate and tell the insurance carriers, you have to have a unified billing code. You have to have a unified, simplified application. You can mandate saying to the carriers, you must be able to cross state lines and compete. You can mandate to the carriers, you got to allow it to be a cafeteria plan for a male or a female, single or family. Here's the coverages I need as a single. Here's the coverages I need as a male. And have the rates accordingly. This is all stuff they could have done. and it would have helped out all of those. The same thing with those 20 million. 343 million Americans are suffering for 20 million or so that were uninsured at the time, and had pre-existing conditions. So the state could have been dictated by the federal government. Here's the rules on pre-existing conditions. Here's what you have to participate in. Each state has their own rules on pre-existing condition. In New York State, where I'm licensed in several other states, but in New York State, it was worded prior to the Obamacare health plan, if you had a pre-existing condition and you had health insurance and your carrier dropped your company that you were with, or you dropped your carrier because you're changing companies, the next company, because you had that insurance prior, and in New York State, as long as you had that insurance without having a 60-day gap in coverage where you had 60 days and no coverage, the next carrier had to pick up you at the regular rate, no penalties, no penalized premium rate, and cover your pre-existing condition from day one. If you gapped that 60-day bridge and got the new coverage at 61 days or later in New York State, the carrier can exclude that pre-existing condition. They cannot, at that time, prior to Obamacare, they could not penalize you for picking up new insurance. They had to give you the regular rating that everyone else got, but your pre-existing condition was allowed to be not covered for 12 months. It wouldn't be covered until the 13th month. But that's New York State law. So this is where the Fed could have mandated to the country, no, you got to do this differently. Now the Fed could also mandate, like in New York State does with the assigned risk with auto policies, for those who don't have coverage, who have a greater than 60-day gap of coverage, they could have made an assigned risk pool and said to all the carriers that offer health insurance in our state must participate and take a certain percentage of uninsured, out of gap, pre-existing clients, and they would have a difference of premium. But that difference of premium could only last a year. Then they would have to go back to the normal premium rate. So this is all the out-of-the-box thinking that these politicians could be doing, these corporations could help them design, but neither the corporation nor the politicians are there helping you. This is why I'm saying we should be rejoicing that we have an outsider as a president. If he was getting proper information and ideas fed to him, how they can direct Congress to be, what they can do. And the only way to get this done is for your voice to tell your Congress representative, this is what I want, this is what you should be doing. So, this is the ramblings of my day. There's a lot that's going on, and I don't think it's going to get any better before it gets a whole lot worse. I'm not a doom and gloom person. I'm a Boy Scout. I'm all about being prepared and having myself insulated from the disruption of what can happen. They've printed $18 trillion with the Obama administration. That's made our currency useless. It's worthless. Trump wants $1 trillion. I don't like that, but he wants $1 trillion for infrastructure, bridges and roads and electricity and dams and hydro dams and nuclear. This country needs to get energy self-sufficient. This country needs to redesign its infrastructure. With all that money they printed, and they did it out of the internet, they didn't even physically print it. It would take between 40 and 70 years printing $100 bills 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on all their printing machines and all their mints. And the two numbers I heard was it would take 40 years to 70 years to print just $1 trillion of physical $100 bills. They just added numbers into the Federal Reserve banking system. Your balance was here, now it's $1 trillion more. Made our currencies and the financial systems invalid. They're fraudulent. They're a house of cards. Inflation is going to come. The question is whether it's hyperinflation, high inflation, and disruption will come. You'll see anything that's hard tangible asset or a commodity-based asset going to go higher. You see it already in your food and energy bills. They are going higher. I don't think it's unrealistic to see oil over $150 to $250 a barrel in under 5 years. I think it's sooner than that. I don't think it's going to be unrealistic to see food very expensive in the next 3 years. Your medication and drugs for the seniors, very expensive. And if you think you're going to get your money out of your property, let me tell you this. the banks, with the laws on them from the federal government and the Federal Reserve on stress tests, you're going to have to jump through such high and tight hoops to get your money out of your property. It's going to be very, very hard. This is not me being a doomsday guy. This is me saying you need to understand what you need to do today and tomorrow so you could be prepared for the what-if scenario that may or may not be disruptive to your life. You need to get self-sufficient. You need to get your own solar on your own property. You need to get your own water on your own property. And I'd start growing my own food. You would want to insulate yourself from the disruption. People on the East Coast will know about this very well. Superstorm Sandy shut down gasoline deliveries. It got violent here. People were dying on gas lines, physically getting killed on gas lines. A few years back, 2001 or 2002, might even been 2003, we had the whole East Coast shut down in darkness because of a substation had an incompatibility issue on their electricity, and safety switches triggered, and it shut down the East Coast and some of the Northeast Coast, going a little west of the East Coast, of power. We went black, dark, for hours, if not a day. I forget it, but it was ridiculous. Those who were prepared, had solar, had home generators, they didn't suffer. The whole idea is being prepared. The whole idea of anything that anyone wants to say biblical, being prepared. I got to take this call. This is Gregory Mascaro saying have a great day. Enjoy the week. Be prepared. Scout motto, be prepared. Until we talk again, take care, be well, speak soon.